because we know, they are telling us in which direction we are going, central bank and digital coin, digital IDs, and now we have the WHO maybe in May. This will be a new world order. This will be a new world order. If the WHO can implement those contracts, I mean, then we really have an NGO which is basically taking over the world. And whenever we had that in the past, then that was the beginning of the real crashes. So I think, yeah, go buy some physical gold and silver because that's money. Everything else is credit.
Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today we're talking to Claudio Grass. He's based in Switzerland. He's a precious metals advisor. His website is claudiograss.ch. As you can see, he believes in sound money and sound society. He's wearing the Mises Institute hoodie, which is really nice, and I'm thinking of getting one. Claudio, welcome to the channel again.
Maneco, always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. So let's get started. I contacted you last week. We spoke probably just over a year ago when I was in Switzerland, in Zurich, and we did an interview. We didn't meet, but I thought it'd be interesting to talk to you for the first time. And yes, yeah, last week we were chatting through email about Milei and the fact that he spoke to the World Economic Forum, and I thought it was really strange that they would invite him, even though they're saying now that they want to be more transparent and they want to regain whatever trust they thought they had. So can we start talking about that, and then after that we'll look at what you see in 2024?
Sure, absolutely. I think, yeah, Milei, I also was surprised to see him at the World Economic Forum. I had once, I heard from Jeff Deist, that Daniel McAdams basically thinks he's a CIA plant. And so I have been following his history. I mean, he's an anarcho-capitalist can never go into politics because you cannot force people to be free. And so Milei, basically, he's an academic. He's coming from nowhere. I never heard about him, before. And then so he has met Zelensky. He's basically has been invited by Mr. Schwab to the World Economic Forum, and he also had a very nice introduction by him. So to me, it sounds all a bit weird, So I don't fully trust. I mean, it was nice, of course, the speech he gave. He said nothing wrong. So he basically is sharing the same ideas as we do. But I mean, yeah, deeds and acts are always different. And the future will show, if he's going to sell out the Argentina to BlackRock and all the others. I have no clue. But I would not trust, I don't believe that a savior is coming from, or that this system can be changed from the top. Let's call it that way. I think there are no messiahs and no political leaders who are going to change, the system we are in because it's so corrupted. And also at the stage where we are in, when we see 3 years of Corona, the Ukraine war, now the Middle East. I think also with Corona, really the governments, especially in the Western world, crossed the red line. Because when you deny us, that we can basically own our own body and mind, that's the end of private property. That's also the basic message of this World Economic Forum. You own nothing and you will be happy. And I think we are going in that direction. Blowing up pipelines, having some Minsk agreements, which basically turn out to be a fraud and all that stuff. And now I think the trend is clear, and this WEF and all the other stuff, that's just distraction, so that people don't act and remain in their false hope that someone is coming and will make everything in order again.
Yes, it's an interesting point you made there about Milei and the CIA. And Daniel McAdams, he works together with Ron Paul, right?
Absolutely, yeah, correct.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when he surfaced, I think about 18 months ago, I was really interested because I think eventually, I think he was originally, like you said, an academic. He was also involved in a TV show or something in Argentina, and then he won a seat in their parliament or Congress. And you looked at all the things he said. He almost sounded like you and me. And like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if there are people at the CIA or MI6 all like looking online and saying, we need to find someone to counter these people. They're getting too much voice. You know, the sound money proponents, the small government people, the people who want central banks to be abolished. And you mentioned private property and what they did, in because of what happened in 2020 to people. Yeah, and it's interesting because I spoke this recently in a video about the Federal Reserve, about the fact that central banks, they don't respect private property because they create currency out of thin air to buy your property, so they don't earn any value. And yeah, if you don't have a central bank and you protect the individual, you don't even have to protect the individual's private property, because if you protect the individual, that is protecting private property. So I agree with you there. What I wanted to ask you now is, because I said to you in one of my emails, couldn't the Swiss drum up enough signatures for a referendum, maybe to close down, the World Economic Forum? Their headquarters is actually in Coligny, in Canton Genève, in Geneva. Their summit is in Davos. But would that be possible, you think? Are the Swiss, the general public, are they waking up to this? A lot of people think, Switzerland, everyone is a globalist.
Yeah.
Of course, you're not one, and you're there. So I'll let you answer that.
Well, basically, it would be possible. We could gather 100,000 signatories and then bring it in front of the people. I think that would work to get those signatories together. I also believe we have enough people in Switzerland who really dislike the World Economic Forum. Also, I have to say, a lot of people in Switzerland, they still don't know that the WEF exists. So it's really, I mean, among our circles, people who are interested in geopolitics, what's going on a higher level and so on. I mean, we are following, the World Economic Forum and so on. But I think in the majority of the Swiss, they have no clue. They just think, that there are some rich guys meeting up in Davos, spending hundreds of thousands, for hotel rooms. So it's a good business, for the guys in Davos, bringing a lot of revenue into that small village. And on the other side, I think, I looked once. I have a good friend of mine. He's a professor of law, but he's a total anarchist, which is quite an interesting combination. And he basically once said, that the impact of direct democracy on all the rules and laws in Switzerland is less than 0.1%. So everything is overrated. I have been involved in two referendums, basically, or two initiatives. One was, the Gold Initiative, and the other one was that we stop funding, public, I mean, the government propaganda, because we have to pay every year 300 francs or something to sponsor, Swiss TV and so on, the government agents. And both times, we got all the signatories together. Both times we have seen that at the beginning, people were standing behind our initiatives. And whenever, a few weeks before the election or the poll started, basically, we have seen, how government propaganda came in, crashed everything. Even we had during the Gold Initiative, we had, the central bank, the head of the Central Bank of Switzerland, he went out doing some propaganda, which is completely forbidden. But it's, so I think, even the WEF, we have the United Nations, we have the Bank of International Settlement. I mean, basically, we would have to kick out all these guys. But as I said, I don't believe that it will make a difference. This is really what the finding over the last 3 years for me personally is that, and that basically came, when I was in Prague in November 2020, interviewing Václav Klaus for this Planet Lockdown movie that I did. So there was a curfew from 6 o'clock in the evening. So I was around 6 or 7. I was walking around Prague, a city with millions of people, completely empty, everything shut down. And back then, I basically understood, the problem are not the guys on the top. I mean, I give a shit about those guys, The problem are all the people surrounding me, all the people giving in, to this oppression and all those restrictions. And And I'm also, of course, I'm in the gold business. So I always say, gold is the money of the kings, silver is the money of the bourgeoisie, barter is the money of the farmers, and debt or paper is the money of the slaves or the servants. And so to me, I really, what I try now is basically to distinguish between, who is a serf and who is a free, self-responsible individual who understands, what's coming, because I think everything operates in cycles. There is nothing new under the sun. If you look into the past, I mean, there are certain patterns which history rhymes. It does not repeat, but it rhymes completely. And what we are witnessing right now is just collectivism, Marxism 2.0. And therefore, I think we are so far into that process that, I mean, the outcome will be the world economic crisis or a world economic depression. It's definitely, so my understanding, of course, nobody knows the truth, nobody knows the future, but everyone has an opinion. And so for me, that's just, the picture I see in the future. And therefore I prepare, I take myself out of the banking system. I try to exit the system as good as possible. I try to meet like-minded individuals. And I have my plan B, which is a bit in the countryside, off-grid. And I think, 100 years ago, maybe we are already in World War III. At the beginning, you don't feel it that way, but, even the currency war, which we have seen over the last decades, was a world war in a way, and so I think we're now going just towards, the destruction of the old system. And even if we kick out WEF and United Nations, it doesn't make a big difference. So no, we should basically really focus on what we can do and how we can take self-responsibility and how we can shape our own future. And so that's why I also believe, we have to leave the system, peaceful secession. Let the servants be jailed, locked up. They should trust the government. I mean, it's their free will. Also, they don't believe in free will, of course. And, all the other guys who understand what's going on, that every 100 years, we basically had the crash of the system, and we know what's coming, so that we should focus on these guys, the productive ones, the self-responsible ones. And then I think that's the best to go through the transition period that we are in.
Interesting. When you were in Prague, just a quick question, did they come after you because you were out after 6 p.m. walking around? Did anyone try?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, it was really empty.
Yeah.
I mean, I was together with a friend, and so we were walking through Prague, and then we finally saw, a spotlight of a police car around the corner, and I basically wanted to pass by, and my friend said, "Now, come on, don't do it. Let's just take the other street."
Yeah. Well, another question, you just mentioned you're trying to get out of the banking system and the system as much as possible. Maybe you could explain to the viewers how you do that and how they could emulate you.
I mean, I think really, what is at stake? It's the banking system. And I think there are all the biggest threats. So, and also we both know that, when we hand over money to the bank, it's not ours any longer. So there are no property rights. And like Credit Suisse and so on, and we have seen, it's only of temporary nature. And so I think that's what I did, 20 years ago I started. So basically I'm not an investor, I'm more an owner. So I own stuff, and of course, I built up my my money position. So I have a lot. I have some gold, some silver, or let's say all my wealth basically is in gold and physical gold and silver. And I have put it on the side. It's stored outside the banking system, where private property is still respected. Okay, I also hold it, still in Switzerland, and my plan B is Liechtenstein, because I truly believe we still have the best protection when it comes to private property rights, just because our politicians don't have as much power as their peers in the surrounding countries. And so I think that's one case. I mean, you can also go into hard assets. I mean, anyway, we are, when it comes to cycles, we had this from 89 to 2000. We had big tech, a lot of liquidity. And then it stopped in 2000. Then we went into the commodity cycle from 2000 to 2011, when gold went from 240 to 1900, which basically came to an end in 2011. another 11 years, 2022. So I think we are back in the commodity cycle. Even when we look into, I think 98% of all the financial Las Vegas universe wealth is in stocks and bonds, and roughly 2% is in commodities. So I mean, commodities heavily undervalued. And so I think it also makes sense, that people can, you can also own nickel, zinc, base metals stored outside the banking system in a private vault. And I think that stuff is going to perform anyway. And at the same time, the property rights are clearly defined. And I also, of course, I look that I basically only work with family-owned companies where I know the owners. So because, I mean, you cannot trust the politicians any longer, but at least, you can trust individuals, business owners, family owners who share the same values, when it comes to freedom and liberty and private property. And they also consider themselves as an enlightened individual, understanding also what the values of enlightenment are and the principles of liberty. And I think that's the best we can do for the time being. And of course, pay down your debt. I think everyone, because for most people, whatever they own, it's based on debt. And I still have the feeling that these guys are going to be impoverished or wiped out over the coming, I don't know, maybe 1, 2, 3 years. I mean, what can we say? We can say that the purchasing power of the people in Europe, let's say Germany and so on, it decreased by 30%. So the middle class, I mean, that's what we see already now in Germany. The middle class doesn't exist any longer. They're already gone. And maybe 3 years ago, it was a different picture, but it's going quick.
Yeah.
And so, people have to really, I mean, they have to step out of their comfort zone and really use their own mind to think and to come up with their own conclusion and dig a bit for the truth, but just don't repeat they should not repeat what they have heard, especially by the mass media, because whatever we hear, whatever we see, I mean, it's a Muppet show. It's completely absurd. And I think a lot of people realize that, but they are so confused that they are just they don't know how to move ahead, and they just give up thinking because they think it's too complex anyway, and I'm too dumb. I have no clue. But that's a little bit, the way I see it.
Interesting you mentioned Germany and that the middle class there is being like destroyed. And I remember when Olaf Scholz was elected chancellor. I think it was towards the end of 2019. I was reading that he was formerly the mayor of Hamburg, which is in the Baltic, about very important Baltic port, the Hanseatic League, Hamburg, and that there's a lot of connection between him and Russia, and that he wanted to expand relations and economic trade with Russia. And it's interesting that a few years later, they start this Ukraine thing starts, and Germany is basically goes from having a national debt of less than 60% of GDP. Germany had they were running budget surpluses. The German economy didn't grow, maybe at 3-4%, but it grew at like 1.5 or 2 without any deficits. So the private sector was doing well. It seems almost like the Americans or the Anglo-American Empire wanted to basically destroy Germany, and I think that's going to impact not just Germany but the whole of Europe and Switzerland, especially because it's such an important economy. Do you what do you think of that theory that I just espoused to you?
Yeah, I think, the German government is not independent at all. I think they have, the Americans. I mean, they are. Yeah, it's we're living in a unipolar world so far. I mean, it's coming to its end, but the Americans were dominating everything, also foreign policy. Claudio and all the stuff they had. I mean, all the influence over the last 70 years. So, and then in combination with 9/11, I mean, maybe you also remember when Bush was in front of the TV, was basically saying, don't never come up with conspiracy theories. Either you are with us or you are against us. And I think that also has been a kind of that was a strong expression. And since then, even when you look at the mass media and so on, I mean, they really were all in line with don't criticize the United States, don't criticize the foreign policy.
Yeah.
So, and of course, yeah, Germany, I think it was, Germany and Russia, because I think it was even Gorbachev who once said, communism was not working in Russia because the Russians rather preferred to kill them by drinking, extensively. And so I think also Germany, I mean, 100 years ago, I mean, Germany has always been in the spotlight, because it was such I mean, when you think about how the British Empire, I mean, it's really the old geostrategy, this Halford Mackinder, Eurasia, we have to separate Europe and Asia. So, I mean, if Germany and Russia goes together, I mean, then they have the natural resources, plus they also have, skilled workers who can produce. So, and then, of course, the whole market would go from Vladivostok to Lisbon. And the Brits knew that, so that's why they wanted to separate Eurasia. And I think Brzezinski did exactly the same. And so that's where we are again. And on the other side, I mean, Germany was a very heterogeneous structure, before 1871, before Bismarck unified, the Reich or whatever. So very very decentralized at the end of the day. And I think this has all been turned into, decentralized structures, trying to, like the Cultural Revolution, like Nazis were a Cultural Revolution for Germany, the Bolsheviks for the Russians, Mao for the Chinese. And now we are back into a kind of Cultural Revolution, with the whole Corona and
Yeah, and also for the Americans, maybe, this woke revolution is like trying to bring down America, just like they
absolutely.
down the Russians, the Germans, the Chinese. And I just want to correct something. I said Olaf Scholz became chancellor in 2019. No, it was late 2021.
Yeah.
So that's even more like flagrant in my opinion. And then a few months later, they instead of trying to negotiate some kind of agreement and trying to keep Ukraine neutral, they start this war. And even President Biden, I think he said at a press conference that someone asked him about Nord Stream 2, and he said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll get rid of that," you know.
Yeah.
And Germany's industry is dependent on cheap energy, and now, like you said, I don't think Germany's independent uh, until all the Allied troops. And it's strange because it's almost 80 years ago that the war ended, or yeah, about almost 80 years. And the Americans and the British are still occupying Germany. So until they leave, Germany's not really making its own decisions.
Absolutely. No, I see it the same way. And so, I mean, of course, Europe, Germany is very important for Europe. So when Germany is crashing, and it's going to crash because everything is done, undertaken by the politicians to crash the system, also in Germany. And I think it's really a war against the Western world. Also they're also going to crash, the United States. When you look at woke or critical race theory, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just Marxism 2.0. It's not the proletarians any longer against, the bourgeoisie. It's now the oppressed versus the oppressor. And the oppressor basically is white, heterosexual, Christian. We are the enemy. And that's the origin sin, You cannot, it's like the origin sin in Catholicism. And so that's the same taken over by woke and critical race theory. So I think it's really, it's the West which is going to, either to die or hopefully, we're going to go through a catharsis, cleaning out. I still believe we have enough people who can think for themselves, who understand that they are gifted with reason, and who also understand, what kind of skills and that they are born free, and that non-aggression principles are, the basis for an enlightened society, and that private property needs to be respected, and that we should be able to speak freely, that we should not be afraid to go to jail because of a wrong opinion, you know. So and that we always have a choice. I think that's really now the key point, you know, that we always have a choice, and that means we can distinguish between right and wrong, and not by legal or illegal. So I mean, a lot of people today, they understand what's going on is really, it's unjust, it's wrong. And but of course, you know, we're on the system. It's still going on. So it's hard, you know, to take those steps, you know, and to to go into the direction of self-responsibility. It's not easy for everyone. But that's why also I think, because this is really the story of Switzerland, you know, non-centralization, everything from the bottom up, that we have been organized on a communal level. You know, like Aristotle once said, you know, demos, the village, krati, the rulers. So this is the Swiss model. And so we are the antidote to the current system, because everything is about total control, total centralization, one world, one world order. You know, this is so. I mean, Switzerland, and also how to to handle, you know, the current situation. I think, you know, just people need to understand that they should go decentralized. You know, that really they have, if they trust their centralized government, I mean, then you can be for sure that it's going into the wrong direction, that it will not turn out for the majority, and that really the way out, and that you don't have to do it completely alone, is basically by go to the municipalities, try to find a nice village with some nice people, bit out in the green, in the mountain area, and that's how you can liberate yourself. You know.
Yeah, and you spoke about Liechtenstein earlier, and I think during lockdown, maybe in 2021 or even 2020, there was uh he's like a relative of the Prince of Liechtenstein.
Prince Michael.
Yeah, Prince Michael, he's a fund manager, and he's awake, and I thought it was really interesting. And Liechtenstein, even though it's a very small country, it's tiny. I read about it, and I didn't realize how decentralized it is. Like all the little communes, they can, if they want, leave Liechtenstein. You know, if they're not happy with the prince, the guy who runs it. So I mean, and Switzerland as well, like you said, I was there for Christmas, and I was talking to my sister, and she's been living there, you know, in Switzerland, and married to a Swiss since 1988. So she's basically more Swiss than she's Brazilian. And she was saying that they wanted to, some big company or people in Bern wanted to have solar panels put up in the mountains, you know, to catch the solar energy, to, you know, with all this green, you know, alternative energy stuff. But the local commune of Zonenland, you know, they had their own little referendum, and 80% said no.
Yeah.
So yeah, it works. And it's ironic though that a country like Switzerland, where there's so much decentralization and people are fairly independent, hosts you know, these globalists. I'm not like having a go at the Swiss. Maybe it's because they felt safe there to put their organizations there, which is weird, isn't it? How do you see that?
I mean, you know,
Like the UN, the WEF, the BIF,
absolutely.
right?
No, I think back. I mean, okay, let's 100 years ago. I mean, you know, when the Cold War started and so on. I mean, Switzerland always has been. You know, the history of Switzerland is that we basically, between the 12th to the 14th century, we were, you know, we were the so-called cow Swiss. So, you know, we were, you know, these communes from the mountain area, and everyone was raising cattle and so on. So we were called the cow Swiss. And so we were fighting all the dukes and all the empire, all the foreigners, you know, trying to enslave the Swiss. So for 200 years, you know, these farmers were the most brutal fighters, and we killed them all. I mean, you know, even, you know, the French, you know, the Habsburgs, you know, the Spanish, everyone who wanted to enslave us, we basically killed the masters and the servants, because back then we were barbarians, but we understood that we are born free. And because we were winning all the battles, or the majority of it, I think 95%, then that's why we became the best paid mercenaries. And because we became the best per mercenaries, of course, that put also Switzerland into a different position because, the French king and, all the rulers in Europe, the Pope and so on, they trusted the Swiss as their private guard, whatever. And as long as the Swiss were paid, then they were also fulfilling what they promised. So there was also, of course, the longer it went, corruption, whenever a lot of money is flowing into a country, there is corruption. And I think the Swiss had, beginning of the 15th century, 1500s, we have seen that heavily corruption took place. And that's also when we basically lost Marignano. And from that moment on, we decided that we're not going to be an expansionary power anymore. But up to 1515, basically Switzerland was, together with France, the UK, or the Brits, and the Habsburgs, we were considered a superpower. Even by Machiavelli, who said, these Swiss, they are, because just crazy guys. And I think so that led also to so we had these contracts as mercenaries, and the contract was, if Switzerland is being attacked, that we can withdraw all the mercenaries. And so all these rulers, these foreign rulers, basically decided, okay, let's leave Switzerland alone because, it's only a mountain area, the crazy guys, no gold, no oil, nothing. So that's why we were also then granted with armed neutrality, with this special status within Europe. And even during the Second World War, we had this armed neutrality. And back then, of course, for all those things, even if you would have told someone in the 30s and the 40s that the United Nations is a bad organization, or, the World Bank and all these, most likely, most of the people would have said, no, these are great guys, they try to help and, good guys, whatever. And of course, these organizations had to find also a neutral place. And the only one which was around was basically Switzerland. But to be frank, and of course, with a very decentralized political system. Back then we already had 7 presidents, and not only one. Or or the municipality was has the biggest power, and then the next level is basically the state or the canton. But we never had a centralized government, with a lot of power. So that basically just came over the last 100 years, basically. But I think that's the historical context why all those organizations came to us. And honestly, of course, we have been corrupted. Our institutions have been corrupt. Look at the banking system. I just looked up Credit Suisse the other day. They made from 2014 to 2021, they made 1.7 billion profit, but they paid out 26 billion in bonuses, and 6 billion to the shareholders. So it just shows, it's all, especially the monetary system, of course, that's the root cause of all corruption from my point of view. And Switzerland has been a banking place. And and when you have a lot of freedom, then you also attract the crooks. The crooks are coming, and because the Swiss were never that much interested in politics until 20 years ago, you never saw a picture of politicians at the streets. No one cared about that shit. And so for these sociopaths, I think it was a safe place. They could do whatever they wanted to. There was no strong national security, no secret service, stuff that they were afraid, and the Swiss a weak government. So I think that's a combination. That is how we basically ended up in the situation we are in today. But still, and I think also during Corona we have seen that. You cannot treat the Swiss the same way like the Germans or the French or the Brits, or even in certain states in the United States and so on. So we had, so our government was not that harsh because they also understand that our culture is still more freedom and liberty loving than in others. And at the same time, that also foreigners came into Switzerland, and they came to Switzerland because of less taxation, less government power, more freedom, more liberty. So we also had a good kind of immigration, even they're not all Swiss. But so I think it's the culture will make a difference over the next few years. There we're going to, because civil rights. There was one of our national. She was the member of the centralized government. She's a Bundesrätin. Yesterday she came out saying, because of the economy, we are expecting social unrest. Now they are warning for for the consequences that they are responsible for. So, I mean, these guys, they know what's coming. And I think the social unrest is coming, these terror lockdowns are coming, because also the migration flood, when we see what's happening in the Middle East, I mean, it's really all about divide and conquer. And that's the agenda which is going on. And I just don't take part in it any longer.
Yeah, just a question I have for you, and it's more of a, you hear a lot on YouTube, this idea that the Swiss uh, developed from the Knights Templars because they lost, the King of France, I think it was 1307, got rid of them, and also the Knights Templars lost, the last crusade, and they fled to Switzerland. How do you see that theory? Is that true? Is there any truth to that? I mean, from what you told me, the Swiss were just farmers.
Yeah, I mean that's how it started. I mean that's how the Swiss
Yeah.
became independent. I heard about that stuff. I mean one guy is Jean Ross or whatever, and so he's very much against Switzerland. I think whatever he brings in. I mean of course I don't know. I was trying to find some evidence. I couldn't find it. But you can always draw some nice conclusions based on in the way you see it. But I know that I mean I know that we became the guard of the Pope, but that was basically also from the Valais. There was a bishop, Catholic bishop, and he basically sold us to the Pope. Uh, but because the Pope Julius back then he wanted to use the Swiss guard to fight the French, but the Swiss had no clue that this was the plan. But we basically had a guy from the inside. How do you say? Not bribing, or basically, I don't know how the word in English. So that this Catholic guy was playing, with the Swiss, but not speaking the truth, and that's how he became, the guard of the Pope.
Yeah.
Um,
What about how do you see what do you see in the short term, not just for Switzerland, but for the rest of the world in 2024? And what do you think are the main things that we need to keep an eye on in terms of the financial system and the economy?
yeah, I mean, the financial system is. I mean, at the end of the day, we still, when you look at total credit, from the Western central banks, it's still expansionary. We can see that, okay, credit is not reaching the mainstream and that they are fighting on struggling with higher interest rates. So, but it's really a centralized system. Some people get the money. And this can be this private public ownership, going into the green bullshit utopia. So they get some money and the government gets some money, but I think the middle class and the highly productive people and so on, they don't get the money. So I think, so for me, I think financial wise and economy, I mean, we are going towards, I mean, you cannot hold the economy on a global scale, for 2, 3 years, destroy, all these supply chains. I mean, Corona was really also addressing, the small and mid-sized businesses. They were destroyed or put into debt and so on. So it's really, I think that's the agenda. So whoever remains in the system is going to have a hard time.
Yeah, and
But
you
then,
here, sorry, just wanted to
yeah,
not interrupt, but you spoke about how the middle class productive people are not doing well. And, reading about Weimar Germany and the hyperinflation, and they talk about how the speculators did really well, and everyone was like almost starving. And here we go. Share price surge helps largest hedge funds to biggest profits on record. So, like you said, things always repeat. Today they're called hedge funds, not speculators. Yeah, so there you go.
yeah, I mean, it's really, it's really a centralized system and it's centralizing. And so, yeah, the middle class, they are just going to be wiped out. Because it's never the scarcity of money, especially not in the credit-based system, because also money is always a means to an end. So it's always about the scarcity of goods and services, and so we cannot just.
What do you mean by that? The viscosity of goods and services?
So what we are doing basically, we're just we're printing a lot of currency, But at the same time, we see that, goods and services are going down, that we are less productive and so on. And we only need money to buy goods and services. That makes us happy. It's not that so it's a means to an end, money. And so I think even there, because we are less productive, we can see that because of this already, it's an impoverishment taking place when it comes to to the broader audience.
Very good. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
But I mean, the other stuff, I think AI, artificial intelligence, I think that's really a topic. And there, I mean, when you look at the mainstream media and so on, I think 2024 most likely can become a very confusing year where we will see that even the mainstream propaganda is becoming more extreme, that they're going to use artificial intelligence. Even this, I've seen some pictures now with demonstrations against the right movement in Germany. Seems to be all manipulated with, artificial intelligence just to make them bigger than they are. What we have seen during the Corona period, that whenever we were going against the government policies, then we had a few thousand people. But I've been there, so I know that we have been many, many more. But it always, yeah. So I think the media it's just government propaganda, and they're going to use this artificial intelligence in the future. And then most likely, people will always, whenever they use artificial intelligence and so on, they will be confronted with what they anyway believe about the system. So it will lead to which will lead and further escalate in the divide and conquer strategy. And I think AI will be a tool that is going to be used for this. And so I think the only thing which is really important is that people have a kind of set of values where they can orientate themselves. So and that's basically the principles of liberty. What does it mean, private property? Freedom of speech. When the government basically is confiscate or censorizing different opinions and so on. I mean, this is communism. This is hate speech is coming from communism. Political correctness is government steered thinking. So I mean, if they understand certain values and certain principles, I think that will help them through the mess which is coming. But I'm expecting 2024. Yeah, we have seen in France a few weeks ago there was a party in a French village, and then the whole story was suppressed for about 10 days until the media came out. So it was a small village, 500 people having a party, and then they had, refugees came from by bus to the party, and they were killing, I think, 17 people, and they were always screaming, kill the whites.
I did hear about that. I mean, not here in the UK.
So we can just see, I mean, also Germany, when you look at Germany right now, it's really being radicalized. So you have, the guys who are pro-immigration against the ones against immigration. And now you can also see that the government propaganda channels are supporting, the guys. So we have to do something with immigration and so on. So it's changing. But I think it's just the aim is just to further divide the people so that they have two groups which will start fighting against each other. And as long as they do it, they don't look up, to the guys who are basically responsible for the whole mess. So this is old days,
Yeah, divide and rule or divide and conquer. And like you said, you just have to stay from the outside and watch it and protect yourself, your family, your community. So Claudio, thank you very much for your time. And any final words for the viewers?
Well, I think keep an open mind, educate yourself, think for yourself. Don't be afraid to speak up. If you are afraid to speak up and you believe that they might fire you or go against you or discriminate you, then you know anyway that you're in the wrong place and you have to do something. Because we know, they are telling us in which direction we are going, central bank and digital coin, digital IDs, and now we have the WHO maybe in May. This will be a new world order. This will be a new world order. If the WHO can implement those contracts, I mean, then we really have an NGO which is basically taking over the world. And whenever we had that in the past, then that was the beginning of the real crashes. So I think, go buy some physical gold and silver because that's money. Everything else is credit, and you only have to look at it. It's your money. It's nothing else, and you will be happy in the future. Yeah. And then you can buy, the goods and services which still around, and you can build up. Yeah, you will be prepared, and you can restart. You're gonna have the financial means instead of funny paper notes or central banking digital coins, which and social credit system. I mean, it's insane. It's completely insane. So yeah, act. What can we do? We cannot change the world, but yeah, think for yourself and try to exit peacefully the system.
Thank you very much, Claudio, for your wise words, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Manico, thank you so much for the interview.
You're welcome.